The World Economic Forum, with its Great Reset agenda, will literally destroy our enviable Canadian democracy and Constitution that previous generations fought to protect. What will you do to protect our Constitution for future generations of Canadians?
Well, to protect the future Constitution, and to protect the rights of Canadians, you got to protect the rights of Canadians. But, okay, so I'm going to answer the WF question, and a lot of folks might disagree with me, and that's okay. It's still okay to disagree with one another. All right, so I don't believe that the WEF is responsible or is controlling for what's going on here. I think it's actually considerably worse. The WEF just espouses hateful, radical, socialist/communist ideology. But then so many other international institutions also do. So does the UN, so does the IMF, so does the World Bank. But it's not just international institutions. You see this radical ideology, you see this cancel culture in local governments, in school boards, in business, and it's not the nature of the corporation that makes it engage in this helpful ideology. It's the cancel culture that threatens the management, that's going to be canceled if they decide to deviate or they decide to speak out against it. We're not fighting, I like to say, we're not fighting Klaus Schwab. We're fighting Karl Marx. Okay? And I come from the former Soviet Union, and they've been at it for 150 years. My family went through something very similar about 103 years ago. When the communists came, there was a war, there was a pandemic, and regretfully they just usurped rights and have completely degraded what was at the time the city of St. Petersburg. That's where it started. So here's what I say to you. For those of you that are worried that it's the WEF, you would be in much better shape if it was actually just the WEF, because then you'd know what the target is. You'd know who the opponent is. But that's not the case. It's radical left-wing ideology that wants to redistribute, that wants to erode sovereign states. And there's a problem with that ideology, because the only way you take personal property is by force. That's the only way they can do it, or by some sort of dicta, by state regulation, such as you got to lock down this brewery. Okay, so we are seeing it, and we've seen it to an unheard of extent in the last couple of years. The ball has really, really moved. And maybe this is why I'm in this race. My family has been fighting this evil for 150 years, and this is my fight right now to take. I just hope that you join me on this fight. Let's call it for what it is.
The National Council of the Conservative Party basically is this council that's not accountable, and they pretty much call the shots for what goes within the Conservative Party. So Johnny from Elmira asks, how do you feel about the integrity of the National Council of the Conservative Party?
Well, good thing my application was approved 2 days ago. Okay, so the National Council is elected, and you can, but maybe the question would be better phrased as, how do you feel about democracy in the Conservative Party? And I think that that is now true for any party. I was on the receiving end of lack of democracy within Parliament when I articulated a sensible, fair opinion. Let's weigh the collateral harm of lockdown versus the risk. Now that we appreciate the risk a lot better, we know that 80% are long-term care homes. We know that children are good. We know that if you don't have comorbidities, so does it make sense to lock down 15 million Ontarians and make them sick? Or have them miss surgeries or cancer screenings or, God forbid, increased substance abuse leading to overdose and so on and so forth. And I was asked to leave caucus over expressing an opinion. I lost my chairmanship of the Justice Committee, something that every lawyer aspired, something that many lawyers, including myself, have always aspired to. It didn't really matter. No, our democracy and our freedom of speech has been eroded everywhere. It's been eroded in Parliament. It's been eroded in the public square. It's now eroded in the media because a lot of folks wondering, do we really have free and independent media anymore if the government subsidizes media or if the government is the main customer of the media? The courts were disjointed. Every single pillar that we've built as Western civilization to protect us against this has seemingly failed. It's unheard of. And it saddens me profoundly. So here's what I'll say. We have to give each other courage, and we have to give other Canadians courage to speak. Like I said before, speech can heal all of this. Because it's not just good for public policy, it's not just good for management, it's not just good for a sports team, it's good for decision making, and it's good for our democracy, even if we disagree with it. George Orwell said, the freedom to speech is the freedom to offend someone is the freedom of speech. We have to be able to comfortably say, and I forget the exact quote, we have to be able to say things that people are not comfortable with, that need to be said. And that's true everywhere, including the Conservative Party of Canada. And the Conservative Party of Canada that is struggling to unite right now needs to do exactly that. And that's precisely what I propose. Let's entertain diversity of opinion within the Conservative Party of Canada to arrive at a better result. Even if you have some folks that are not overly happy with the result, at the very least, you open it up for a conversation and you make them feel welcome. Without doing so, the Conservative Party will never win an election again.
Ryan from Kitchener asks, many politicians run on a platform of smaller government only to continue government spending growth upon election. How committed are you to shrinking government and balancing the budget? How can we trust you on this?
Trust is a matter that transcends issues. Doesn't matter whether it's budgets or lockdowns or democracy or autism. Either you trust a person or you don't. And that's what I hope I bring to the table. I always say what I think, and I believe that I do what I believe is right. For what it's worth. In terms of our finances, we went from a $600 billion debt to a $1.3 billion debt. We got nothing for it. Did we hire a single nurse? Did we build any beds? Did we help small business? On average, small business took on $180,000 worth of COVID debt? No, nothing. That's the cause of our inflation. And that's the cause of so much of our dysfunction. It's not just about spending. It's about the fact that government never gets it right. Ever. Ronald Reagan said that one of the scariest phrases in the English language is, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help. No, thank you. And over the last couple of years, I looked at government very carefully and I tried to study what was happening. And here's what sort of happens. First of all, nobody will call out the problem. Because if you call out the problem, you've got to call out your boss. And that's not good politically. Or if you call out the problem, you're out of your lane, and you've got to stay within your lane, or that's going to be a problem for you politically. So no one calls out the problem. But even if someone calls out the problem, now you need to craft a solution. But then stakeholders and lobbyists and voters and special interests come in and they say, well, you can't do that. You can't do that. So the solution that's being crafted is entirely different from the solution that actually needs to be crafted, if one is crafted at all. That's what I call political friction. Politics gets in the way of the actual solution. But even if you identify the problem, and even if you crafted a solution, now you've got to go and implement it. You've got to go for execution. So you hand it over to the bureaucracy, but they're also marked by politics. They also don't call each other out. They don't call out the delays, the incompetence, overtime, over budget, always. Because good people just don't survive in these systems. They don't. And so implementation fails as well. And that's why nothing ever gets done. They don't call it out. They come up with a different solution because of political interference, and they can't implement it. And I know that I sound really pessimistic right now, and what's the way out of it? There's only one way out of it, and I think that's the way out of the problems that we have in government. It's leadership. You have to have the political will to put your political capital on the line and say no, no. And unfortunately, when you're driven by re-election, like Doug Ford right now, he's just driven by re-election. When you're driven by that alone, you can't use the word no. Which is why, in fact, their slogan is, we say yes. That's, I think, the slogan of Doug Ford going to this election. We're the party that says yes. That's the key. Leadership.
Terry from Kitchener says, my reserve, Kitigan Zibi Anishinabeg, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is less than 2 hours from Parliament Hill. For years we have had the highest cancer rate per capita due to the condition of the water and its delivery system. Despite being promised every election that money will be available to assist with infrastructure that would get clean drinkable water to reserves, it is yet to materialize. What is your plan to mend the relationship and distrust between Canada's Aboriginals and government? And do you plan to deliver on this long overdue promise?
100%. In fact, that is the very best thing we can do for reconciliation. Yes, it's important to learn the past and recognize the past and learn from the past. But the best thing you can do to reconcile is to improve the lives of Indigenous communities and Indigenous Canadians. And so that begins with precisely the subject matter of this question, and that is water. In Ontario alone, there are more than 125 communities that do not have clean drinking water. Shame on us for talking about this for more than a decade, and still, so many communities are without drinking water. We've got to start thinking out of the box. We have so many awesome technological solutions today in the market that don't necessarily require a large filtration system. There are systems today that make water out of air, just like basic condensation. There's technology today to deliver water to Indigenous, to northern, to remote communities. That's what we should be doing. We should be looking to implement a technological solution, not worry about politics, and actually deliver water, which is why when I announce my platform, I will commit to making sure that every community in Canada has clean drinking water before the end of my first term.
Nadia from Waterloo asked this question, and some of the background here is, having been hoofed out of the Progressive Conservatives, she would ask, why did you decide to join forces with the Conservative Party? They've been bobbing up in unison with Liberals lately, and lost many people's trust, myself included.
So we can restore our trust. So together you help us win the leadership of a mainstream party that actually has a chance at beating the Liberals and forming government. I'm also principled. I hear you. But I don't believe that our electoral system will permit another party to potentially win seats in the House of Commons. Especially during the most remarkable time in our history, when it was effectively the only game in town on what mattered to so many in this room. It's just how it is. It's first past the post. You need 30 to 40% of the vote in a certain neighborhood to win a seat. But I'm not giving up, because the Conservative Party of Canada will be like any other institution or any other organization. It will be as good as its leadership. And I believe that we can restore confidence and we can go to the electorate and we can win elections by getting good, sensible, honest, competent, consistent leadership.
Seems like the room is dying out. Last one, because the room's dying out. Have another beer.
Three to pick. Can I have two? Two more, all right.
Okay. Tim from Waterloo asks. Okay. One question, we'll open the floor. Tim from Waterloo asks, in light of the announced deal between the Liberals and NDP, that means there could be no federal election until 2025. If selected as leader of the Conservatives, will you run in a by-election so you'll be able to be present in the House of Commons and hold Trudeau to account in Parliament?
Yes, the intention would be to win a seat as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
One more.
Okay, we'll go to the floor since that was the request. Go ahead, you had a question there.
Gentleman over there had a question.
You had a question, go ahead.
This guy.
You say you're very concerned with the right of Canadians to board planes and, do whatever, go to college and university. But what about the right of unborn Canadians to be born without being murdered? Could you speak to your position on that, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, look, this is an issue that a lot of people disagree on. I respect everyone's opinion, and I respect your opinion, and I will welcome your opinion in the House of Commons, in this brewery, or anyone else. My opinion is that as government, I cannot interfere in a healthcare decision of another person. That's my, no problem. You might disagree with me. That's okay.
That's scientific.
I-
It's not me disagreeing. Okay, sorry. Is a human baby in the womb a human life or not? Maybe that should be my question. Let me rephrase it.
Well, first you have to define life.
Sorry?
You have to define life.
That's what I'm asking, right?
So first of all, there's the law of the land. And the law of the land found that any legislation, that at least the legislation that existed at the time, that sought to abridge the ability to terminate pregnancy was contrary to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That I think happened in 1989 or 1992. So I will respect the law of the land for sure, because that's why I'm here.
Well, the law of the land decided that vaccinations
But,
can't go to school. So respect that one. Where do you draw the line?
No, the law did not decide that, and that is illegal. But-
Killing people isn't
Dude.
illegal?
Look,
I asked for
you can disagree with me. Okay? You can walk away and say, you know what? Romans, I don't like what Romans doing, I don't like what Romans thinking. I'm telling you what I think. And I'm telling you what I believe, and I'm telling you what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, don't vote for me. Don't vote for me.
the law of the land determines share with me your personal
All right.
conviction.
So I'm going to speak to this. I believe that it's my body, my choice on all elements. I believe that I cannot tell a person that they need to do or not to do something against their body, with their body, when I'm telling them that I will protect their fundamental right not to engage in a medical exercise that they don't want to engage in. That's my view. I want to be consistent on this.
Right now in Canada, there are no limitations on abortion whatsoever. You can have an abortion up to 9 months. Even those liberal democracies in Europe place some reasonable limitations on abortion. Abortion in Canada has become a sacred cow. We can't even talk about it anymore. But there are some reasonable things that we can do to put us in line with something that's a little bit more morally balanced, I would say. Would you agree with that? Is that something you would pursue?
I don't think that opening this question right now would be a priority of mine. What I would say is, it's very, very important for... Sorry? I'm happy to have the conversation. I'm not saying... I'm saying the legislative. I'm saying the legislative conversation is not interesting for me. But if someone wants to bring legislation, if this gentleman was the member of parliament from Waterloo, and he wanted to debate this in parliament, or if he wanted to introduce this legislation in parliament, I would protect his right to do it. Sir.
First off, I would like to thank you because you're one of the very few members of the provincial parliament that stood up and defended our rights during the last few years. Now, I have been a member of the Conservative Party federally and provincially for close to 1 years. Conservative? Oh my God! Do I look like a loser?
I was a Liberal Party supporter.
Yeah,
Maybe go get some pizza.
So anyways, that makes sense. So, and you put your money where your mouth is, you got kicked out of caucus, and I thank you. Now, I think the most important question, I know there's a lot of questions here which I may or may not agree with. The most important question now, unfortunately, is the freedom of the individual and our Constitution. Our Constitution has been completely trampled. It's no longer a Constitution, it's like a guideline. And our freedom of the individual is no longer sacrosanct, which it used to be. So I'm asking you, as a man to man, if I were to give you my vote, will you stand up no matter what? The freedom of the individual and our Constitution are sacrosanct, and they shall not pass that. What say you about that? Will you stand up no matter what? Our Constitution shall not be passed, and the freedom of the individual is sacrosanct and shall not be passed. Say you.
So if I was a politician, I'd just say yes, and I'd leave. The answer is yes, but that also means recognizing the limitations of the Constitution. Something that I think about often, and something that I teach as well. Our Constitution has limits. So for instance, we know that we have the right to liberty. But despite our right to liberty, we incarcerate people. So clearly, we have some sort of reasonable limit. The problem is, the COVID bizarro world that we have endured for the last couple of years, and the cancel culture and ideology that has seeped itself into every institution has now considerably moved on what that reasonable limit is. So what I'm saying is, yeah. No. So, of course they did. We lost every constitutional litigation there is. I myself brought constitutional litigation. I sued the Attorney General for my ability to protest my own legislature, which I was denied, and I sued the Attorney General for my right to pray in my synagogue outdoors. And all of this was outdoor litigation because the province cannot point to a single case of outbreak outdoor, and yet it tells me that I can't protest the very legislature that I sit in. 1 minute. 1 second. The courts are vested with this determination. Government comes and tries to abridge rights. The Constitution comes the other way, seeks to safeguard rights. The question is, you have to come down where you believe it's demonstrably justifiable to abridge rights. And it worked great. And yes, the court gets it wrong sometime. But what happened in the last 2 years was we underwent a remarkable period where courts were effectively disjointed, where they have succumbed to the ideology and the cancel culture that canceled all sense of common sense around us. They're also people, and they're not immune from the same pressures. What we need to do is you're not gonna imagine your way out of the charter. You're not gonna imagine your way out of the British parliamentary system. What you need to imagine yourself back to is fair conversation, is freedom of speech, is the ability for me to come into court and articulate an opinion that is so unpopular that I don't have to fear that all my clients are going to leave me. Very few credible lawyers actually got involved in COVID litigation because of cancel culture. So my answer to you is, yes, of course, I will defend the Constitution, 100%. But we have to recognize that it wasn't a constitutional issue that was the problem right now. It was speech and cancel culture that was a problem.
I'm sorry, but that's not true.
No problem.